Hi folks, hope you're well, if not get better quickly. Um, yeah, so many topics, so little time. Um, One of the comments on my video, on one of my videos, it's always nice to get positive comments and ideas for doing videos because quite frankly, I think that, I'm all spoke out, as they say. You know, in crass terms, I've shot my load with the way I roll, what I think, because what I think is going on here, it's subject to change. That's for sure. I'm not that arrogant to think I know everything. I don't. I have to change my mind. And one of the things about being grown up is accepting that what you previously thought was wrong, given the available information at the time. You implant it and start to believe it. And I've also, like a lot of people, got a lot of deprogramming to do as well. Um, just trying to focus. There we are. So I am always open to persuasion. Yes, I know, I'm such a tart. Well, I have to be very careful. Um, but one thing is for sure, is I don't take the word of the hidden hand. And I could smell a rat very early on in my school, probably 7. I thought something was strange. Yes. When to the age of actually 5, 6, they slung a globe in my hand and said, "Can you spot where we live?" on this ball. And, from that moment on, I've been a bit suspicious. Call me old-fashioned, slap on my thigh. That's the way it's been for me. And I'm not immediately trusting now. There's a great saying, lies, damn lies, and statistics. And the same can be said for mathematical proofs. Because you can manipulate numbers. You can make numbers say almost anything you want if you put them through the ringing machine, the mangle, long enough. People say, yeah, okay, yeah, I accept that. They can't be asked to go through the mathematics of it all. But the one thing is that even Einstein was proven wrong because Einstein couldn't prove the existence of gravity. It was a theory and it remains a theory. And quite frankly, nobody has a bloody clue, not a clue what gravity is, because how can you define something that technically doesn't exist? It's whatever we call it, but it's our thoughts of what pulls things down to the floor, or does it pull things down to the floor? What is this force we call gravity? And with all nobody really can explain it. And equally, we make silly attempts gravity, the reasons things fall at a certain speed depends on their density and mass. That's a straight fact. The feather versus the lead ball, drop them and you'll see what happens. It's not one is lighter than the other, it's a sense of which one's made up of more mass and is denser. It's as simple as that. But the other thing can be said then, can't it, for the tides? There is no way that anybody can convince me that the tides are affected by the moon. They're not. It's absolute bullshit, in my opinion, that the tides are affected by the moon. Because the argument that the moon controls the tides or controls the water is a fascinating one, because it's rather strange. If it's just the water per se, why don't freshwater lakes, and there are some very big ones, get affected? Why don't freshwater lakes have tides? Well, for a start, they're independent of the sea. That's for sure. Okay? They are self-contained and they are maintained by the water from above us down. It boils off, and comes back again. So fresh water and salt water, let's just take it that seas are not connected to the Great Lakes of our world, or even your local fishing pond. Okay, so now we accept that, don't we? Yes, we do. And it's a full moon. It's a neap tide tonight. A neap tide. That means it's going to be an extra violent one coming in. We might get flooded because they call this thing a neap tide. It's going to be bigger than normal. Oh, yes, it's going to be a full moon. It's going to be when the... And I just have to smile that people accept this. And we accept it like folklore, don't we? That it's the moon, you know. It's the moon. Like werewolves. And it's the full moon tonight. Got to stay in. The werewolves will be out. Oh, yada, yada, yada. Well, nobody seems to want to look at the facts, do they? I'm sure people have. It's just I can't be asked to look for it. Is that under the oceans of our world, if you watch David Attenborough, when he's doing his wonderful, wonderful series of underwater submariner bit with cameras, down to the deepest ocean beds of our world. In Antarctica, for example, got some seriously deep seas there. There is a layer of what they call, well, there's a seabed, which is often 6 or 7 miles deep, made up of sludgy mud. Okay, and then we have, that's coated by a layer of water called supersaline. It's incredibly salty, saturated solution, really, of... Saturated means you can't mix any more salt with it. It's going to be as salty as it can ever be. There's a layer called supersaline. Saline means salt water. And then laying on top of that supersaline is the standard seawater. And the standard, all our seas are linked. Don't know if you know that, but they are. Okay, it's one huge sea interspersed with land masses. So really, you know, if you scoop a bit of water out of the English Channel, you're really, to be honest, got a cup of the Pacific in your hands. It depends where it wants to go. Okay? It's just a long way from home if it is Pacific water. But it's the same. It's all one body of water. And then we have the land masses with our Great Lakes and rivers, of course. But the supersaline is constant throughout the world, under the sea, at set depths. Now then, what happens is the supersaline goes up and down. It has a pulse. It goes up and down, and up and down. And the supersaline and the standard sea don't mix, which means that as the supersaline comes up as its wont, it displaces the standard unsaturated seawater above it. Okay? And then rests again. What happens to the displacement is the distal ends, one side to the other, the water rises and the water falls. And that's the tides. And why no one's going to admit this? Well, they do. Some people agree with this. I agree with it. It makes common sense. And you know, sometimes under Occam's razor, the simplest explanations are often the one that is absolutely true. Because if you look and study the moon, with its tide influences on the tide, that doesn't make sense. Okay? Why would it just be the moonlight, the effects of the moon, affecting only salt water? If it's the gravity thing with the moon, well, call me old-fashioned, which one would you believe? we were ruled by giants in them days. That was I read that somewhere, and I'm sure we were. But where are they? Where are all their skeletons? Well, they've been discovered, folks. But, I mean, up to 60 feet tall, 60. Some seriously big players of skeletons. Skeletons with 6 digits, not just 5. Skeletons in their skulls with 2 rows of teeth, one set behind the other, have been dug up. And they get sent to these things. They're supersized, varying sizes, from 8, 9, 10, 11, all the way up to 30 feet. And more, probably, have been roaming the world. I've got a book called Ancient Forbidden Archaeology. It's a 65 quid book my son bought it me for Christmas, bless his heart. Fabulous book. And all over the internet, if you go onto YouTube, you can look at these skeletons that have been excavated and you think, that's a fake, it's too big, it's too big. Because we cannot, quite frankly, get our head around it, can we? That here we are, we think 6'8", 7 foot is pretty tall, don't we? Oh, it must be a basketball player. They stand out from the crowd for sure. But try having a 20-foot man stood there. You know, now, where are they now? Well, it's just because we haven't got them to hand right now, doesn't mean they've never existed. Okay? But they have, because like everything else, giants existed. You couldn't make it up. Why would you make it up that giants have got 6 fingers and 2 sets of teeth when you have skulls, enormous skulls, perfectly formed and preserved as a skeleton? And where do they go? They get packed up and they get sent to, guess where? The Smithsonian Institute in America. And the Smithsonian Institute is part of the Hidden Hand group, folks. That if something doesn't fit in with the Hidden Hand's agenda of what we are supposed to perceive and believe as our history, it gets shredded. They don't need to know that. Keep it simple. Keep it in the history books. You know, delete the fact is there were giants in those days. It's a myth. Where's the evidence? Well, the evidence gets immediately by these stupid people called archaeologists who spend hours with a little scratch, 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 scratch at taxpayers' expense because they're on a grant. Brush, brush with a little paintbrush. Just dig the bloody thing up, will you, and get on with it. We haven't got all day, you know. But they do. They crate these things off by their hundreds to the Smithsonian Institute, who've got massive amounts of storage space. And it's not open to the general public. Well, why not? That's the crux, isn't it? That's the big question. Why can't you and I go and see these things? Oh, no. Not at all. The evidence is overwhelming. The photographic evidence alone is overwhelming that these things exist. The science is already in. They're just such liars, aren't they, and deceivers? Well, one guy wrote in a very hush-hush book that he was working on board a sea vessel. And, you know, late at night, let's say, this thing was cargoed up with enormous crates of bones and was commissioned with the crew of this big ship to go out in the middle of this ocean and chuck these bones overboard. And what a surprise, he actually leaked out, excuse the pun, the story of he couldn't understand these skulls that were being pulled out were the size of half a man or half a person. Overboard. Beautifully preserved, enormous, giant skulls and long bones and rib cages and everything. And yes, they did have 2 sets of teeth, and yes, they did have hands with 6 fingers. And you can only imagine the strength. And it is explained by many people that these giants were the Nephilim. Okay, the initial. Now, I've said before that it's at least 4 or 5 or 6 times, be honest, in my thoughts, that humans have inhabited this world in our various formats. Now, I'm not savvy enough to know, really, I don't think anyone knows, whether these giants flew in or were the residents here before the others flew in. Because if you can believe the Dead Sea Scrolls, that the average plebs, the humans that were here at the time of the Dead Sea Scrolls were written, I think, 45 AD. But the Dead Sea Scrolls were taken in dictation from beings that arrived at that point and told these people who scribed out the Dead Sea Scrolls what had happened nearly 600, 700 years before that time. And talked about spaceships, talked about giants, talked about all sorts of stuff. And all this information and the destruction of man that was forecast by the Dead Sea Scrolls was all gathered, okay, and sent to Israel under armed guard for translation. And that's where it remains today. And you and me don't get a chance to have a look at that translations of what is truly written in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's not for us peasants to know what was forecast, and is history repeating itself, because this was the point made, is that even in the Dead Sea Scrolls they were talking about the fact is that humans have written themselves off on this world at least 4 or 5 times. You think, well, that's interesting, but I don't mind knowing it. I'm not going to be suicidal when I read that to be true. And the other thing I do comprehend and accept is, without being stupid about it, is that why are we so arrogant to think that we're the only ones in existence in this universe? When there are billions and billions and billions of other star systems out there? Well, there are. What are the odds? So it comes as no surprise that people visit here, or other beings visit here, to tell us that they may live a lot longer than us too, but maybe they don't want to hide the truth from us like our controllers on this world. Because it's my firm belief that there's no way that we are all the same humans. I mean that in the nicest sense. I don't mean to be racist. But there are black people, there are Chinese people, there are Asian people, there are Muslims, and those, Asian types, okay? And the Caucasians, and Aborigines. There is a mixture of us all. And you might like to think that we're all homogenized. Yes, we could interbreed. But that was never the design. The desire was to give us all choice. But there's no way I came from somebody who was from Negro genetic background or Asian background. You just have to check the gene pool and prove it to yourself. And it's the same with standard people. In size-wise, for example, if you look at the local height in Japan of people compared to the European people, and then you have the African people, generally speaking, there is a height difference between them all. So to say there were no giants when there's evident proof, but I have to look and wonder why it is in the Smithsonian's Institute's makeup that they suppress all this information from us. If you look at some of the ancient archaeology that's been found, the hidden archaeology, the places that you and I can't go to, what would life be like if we were surrounded by giants, incredibly strong and clever, of advanced technology? Just because they're big and come from thousands of years ago, maybe 8 million, well, they might have had super technology. The world is far older than we're led to believe in the textbooks. The technology has been dug up very deep in the ground and into rock structures that are hundreds, if not thousands of feet deep. And you open a brick up and inside there are such very high-tech surgical instruments that have been discovered, enclosed, encapsulated in rock that is provably millions of years old. Well, how did it get there? Did it beam me up, Scotty? So yes, I believe there were giants on this world. And there are probably still in existence some residue of those that are hiding in the deep crevices of our world. And I also believe that there is a Middle Earth, like J.R. Tolkien talks about in The Hobbit, etc., Lord of the Rings. So when you look at it, sometimes Tolkien was trying to tell us something about Middle Earth, and I'm bloody sure that there isn't there is no way that there are not underground cities we're not aware of, with ecosystems we're not aware of. It's like everything else, ignorance is bliss, isn't it? Well, for me it's not, because I would just love to know. But a lot of people are perfectly happy with what we got and just get on with it and don't really care. So that's not my nature. I'm just inquisitive, I suppose. Of late, the latest thing I've adopted in my mind, and I'm absolutely convinced now, having taken lots and lots of videos of stars with my Nikon P900, is that they're not at all light years away. And I do believe that we are protected from outer space with a dome called the firmament, and we live on a flat earth. Now, before you start laughing about that, you have to realize there's more common sense. It makes sense that we're on a flat plane, because water will always find its level. That's why it's called a spirit level. And that's why we view things at sea level. It's got nothing to do with height, it's level. A friend of mine's a very high-spec, high-grade engineer for the railway companies that make and lay the tracks of trains, including monorails. Okay, but when they're laying the train tracks across, let's say, from Edinburgh to London, I asked him, do the engineers take into account for the curvature, alleged curvature, of the Earth? He said no, because there's no account to be taken. There is no Coriolis effect. It's a complete fabrication when you're looking at the nonsense about the spinning Earth effect on a body at all. Aircraft navigation just fools the pilots into thinking that there's automation of correction of the Coriolis effect, because we are, as a flat disk with a small belly, not a semicircle, Okay. We are not spinning. And we're not going through this space at so many million miles an hour, curling and fighting and rotating. No, we're not. Go stand outside on a perfectly calm day and look at a lake and watch a hoverfly or watch a tiny little bug sitting on the water. And you tell me there's not a ripple on the water, not a movement, not a breath of air. Come on, tell me we're spinning around at 1,000+ miles an hour. Well, if you get a tennis ball and dip it in water and spin it, all the water would fly off because of centrifugal force. That's a property. Well, we're spinning around allegedly at 1,000 miles, aren't we? 1,600 miles, something like that. I can't remember. It's the fluoride. Well, why don't our oceans gang up on the edge and then piss off? Well, here's the deal. I'll tell you why. A, we're not spinning. Okay. And B, above our firmament, that dome I talked about, okay, space is water. There we go. I know, you think I've lost the plot. Don't be stupid. For a start, the sun and the moon. No, the sun and the moon are not, truth be known, in outer space. They are within the firmament. And the sun is questionable because it's only 35 miles wide, as is the moon, by the way. Same size, same. And they're at the same height. It's just that when they rotate, or seem to rotate, above our heads, the sun goes slightly faster than the moon, and it catches it up 3 times a year, and we get, guess what? Eclipses. Oh, for sure. I've seen them with my very own eyes. Oh, we've sent people to the moon. Even if we did send people to the moon, they wouldn't have to be in what we consider outer space. Because you get up to above 70 miles up, and you're going to come across a bit of a problem called the firmament. And we know that's there because the Americans tried to nuke it. And within the firmament are the stars. So the stars, you could say, are just on top of the firmament. And the firmament, rather like a glass dome, protects us from the floodwaters of outer space. And this would make perfect sense. Because if you use a telescope to any large degree and look at some of the NASA pictures, if you can believe their lies, but sometimes they tell truths between lies, and certainly some of the ufologists that do a lot of this work, and look at, if you get some infrared specks, night vision specks, sorry, and you get into deep space, there's lots of movement that you're not aware of going on, and it looks very much looking like into an aquarium. If you ever looked under a microscope, for example, at little water plankton, tiny little microorganisms, bugs swimming around in the water. And the movement of such things in the sky is the same in deep space. And there is simply no way that there is a vacuum in space. There's water. And here's the thing. They're actually saying now, the local press in the advanced science papers, there's water's been discovered on the surface of the sun. Well, of course it is, because the sun's not hot. It truly isn't. It works on cold fusion. Okay? And any water around it, yes, there's water vapor. And there's a prolific amount of water, as above, so below, as it's written, so it is written, in outer space. It's as simple as that. We have outer space, which is full of water, a firmament, some air, and then we have our seas. And that's the end of the matter. And we're protected with a bubble. We are living in a bubble of air. That's all. And that air is fully encased. And that's why plants make the oxygen, and we have that, and we give out carbon dioxide that feeds the plants. Humans, with all our piety and wit, cannot manufacture water. There is the one thing that humans cannot, with all our arrogance and our knowledge, you cannot make water. And yet it's the most prolific substance in the universe, is water. And when you see people in NASA's swimming pools, these allegedly doing the spacewalks, they're really shoving it in our faces that this is actually what these guys are experiencing. If they were to get into outer space. But they don't. Because man has not been out to space. It's been in low Earth orbit, and yet we cannot get past the firmament to get into the big swimming pool up there. That's all. So my belief is that the space, or outer space, what we perceive to be a vacuum, is not. It's actually a bloody huge swimming pool. And the gas balls that exist are called what we perceive to be planets. But they're not, they're gas balls. Earth, in its form, is unique. Our planet. I'm not saying there are not other planets similar, but we are certainly special in our universe. And the people on the world are special. And yet we're treated like the village idiots. And we are treated like mushrooms. We're kept in the corner, in the dark, out the way. And we're fed shit. That's what you do with mushrooms. And we're expected to believe all this crap that we're fed. And it's an insult to our intelligence to see these people saying that they're loafing around in low Earth orbit, pretending to be in outer space, doing their little spacewalks. All I know is that I'm prepared, whatever the controllers say and whatever the schools are teaching, I'm inclined to read between the lines and think every time their mouths move, they're lying. And this is why they shut people up. And people go on disappearing acts if they come too close. They get a little visit. Well, why don't they want us to know this? Because the truth will set us free. That's why. To realize that human beings are very special indeed. We have a soul. Dogs have a soul. I'm reasonably sure cats have a soul. But dead cert that dogs and humans have a soul. And we will keep coming back until we know how to behave. We have so much to learn. One thing I don't need to learn anymore, I've got it well ensconced in my head, is that there is an agenda to keep the general population as thick as dog shit. Okay, they tell us what to be taught, is what is taught at school. They tell us what we're supposed to think. They brainwash us on a daily basis. And they feed us bullshit. We're supposed to swallow it. And they hide the evidence of what was our inheritance and our heritage. And all they do is basically milk us for our labour and get rid of us. We are slaves, Neo. That's about the sum of it. Well, wake up, people, and realise that you can't go far wrong. Whatever the hidden hands say is true. Just think the opposite is a pretty safe bet. I'd like to know your opinions about such things, and I will endeavour to find a link to watch underneath in the comments section that'll actually open your eyes for once. Love you all, take care, and be prepared. I'm off to look for some giants.